When we first meet someone, I think it's very common to try to figure out what boxes to put them into. And this can happen by just looking at them and observing them, or if you're being introduced by a mutual friend, maybe some words of introduction are offered that help you figure out who this person is, or you ask questions. And throughout my life, I have found it very interesting to identify these feelings of sort of stress and fear associated with some of those questions. One of the early ones as a child is, what would you like to be when you grow up? Being asked that as a kid by an adult always felt very intimidating to me because I had no idea. And I didn't want to have to answer that question. It felt like pressure to decide what I would be doing for the rest of my life. And as a kid, all I wanted to be doing at that time was just to be and to enjoy doing what I liked doing, most of which made no practical sense. Keeping chickens, knitting, calligraphy, working at Pioneer Village eventually. Anyways, one of the questions that still causes a bit of anxiety is when someone says, so, what kind of music are you into? What kind of music are you into? I do not know how to answer that question. Usually, the person asking that question, it's in some kind of context of a date or like a romantic context. That's usually the person asking. You're on a first date, or maybe it's more than just the first date and they come home with me, or I go home with them, and then music is going to be played, and then the question is asked. So what kind of music are you into? I don't ask that question because I know the feeling associated with having to answer that. I don't know how to answer that question because the truth is all kinds of music. And that's kind of what I awkwardly say, all kinds of music. I love music. I think most people love music. So I thought today I would share with you the pile of CDs that I have here in the barn in Rhode Island that reflect music that really moves my soul. Music that I absolutely love. Music that inspires me, and music that fuels me in not only my creative endeavors, but fuels me to be okay with life. I think music often acts as a tonic or a medicine to me. When things are difficult, when things are challenging, when things are sad, someone once said to me, when you're sad, just sing. Just sing. Just open your mouth and sing something. And that advice was given to me at a real low point in my life, and I started just doing it. When I felt really low, I would just open my mouth and sing something, sing a line of something, and it really works. So here's what I've been listening to in the barn for the last 5 years, since I helped to clean out this place. I didn't help, I did it. Since I cleaned out this barn and turned it into a little studio, I've had almost every single one of these CDs in here, and they're played on a constant loop. This is the first CD. The group is called Anonymous 4. The album is called An English Lady Mass, and it is 13th and 14th century chant and polyphony in honor of the Virgin Mary. So many of these CDs actually were just here. Eve picked them up at yard sales, and there are hundreds of CDs in the house, and I would just go through the pile and pull out some stuff and try it out, and if I didn't like it, I would return it, and then if I loved it, it ended up staying here in the barn. This was in that pile, and this is a gem. I didn't know anything about this group. I found out later that Erica, Guy Wolf's wife, when I visit Connecticut, Erica plays early music. She plays the viola da gamba, and she loves this group as well. So we started talking about this group, 4 women that they sing these very old religious pieces. And the thing that I couldn't believe after listening to this for a couple of years was that there's no instrumentation in this. This is just a cappella. And it's the 4 voices. Polyphony means that each, it's different melodic lines sung together. And it creates this very rich sound. So these are all religious pieces. I am not Catholic, I'm not Christian, but I did grow up with an Irish aunt. My mom's older brother married an Irish lady, like really from Ireland. And ever since I can remember, Auntie Bridgie was in our family. And Auntie Bridgie had an Irish accent, and that partially is why I'm so good at the Irish accent, is because as a little child I was always mimicking people, and to the point of being chastised, like when we would go to the flea market and there would be Chinese people, I would be doing the Chinese accent, and my mother would have to put her hand over my mouth and say, "Stop that, now you stop that." So when Auntie Bridgie was around and she would be talking to me like this, I started talking back like this, and she was very, very amused. Interesting story. A few years ago, Auntie Bridgie used to always say, when I was a teenager and when I started acting, she used to say, "Rajiv, do you know that my brother is related, well, we're related to Martin Short's family in the county Armagh. The town is called Crossmaglen, and my brother lives very close to Martin Short's family, and his Auntie Rosaline owns the pub in the town. And if you could just get to Martin Short and tell him that, I'm sure he would help you get into the films." So my Auntie Bridgie would say this every time I saw her for years. And it was like, yeah, sure, Auntie Bridgie, yep, Martin Short, yep, got it. Well, like 3 years ago, I was at an SNL after party, and who was sitting at the table with my old friend and producer of Mean Girls, Lauren Michaels, but old cousin Marty. Martin Short was in the episode, and he was sitting next to Lauren Michaels, and I think Eddie Murphy was at the table. And I was with my friend Laura, and I said, "Should I go over and introduce myself finally to Martin Short?" And Laura said, "Do it. Do it, yeah, you must do it." So I got up my courage. I went over to the table, said hi to Lauren. Lauren was like, oh, everyone, this is Rajiv. Rajiv was in Mean Girls, you might remember. "Hi, Rajiv, how are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing great. I'm actually here to speak to my cousin. Martin, do you know you're my cousin?" He's like, what? Yeah, what? And then I said, "I have an Auntie Bridgie, and she is from Crossmaglen, and she has always said, if you ever meet Martin Short, you must go up to him." And as I was talking like that, Martin's face completely changed, and he said, he turned to Lauren, he's like, you don't understand. He's doing the accent exactly like, how do you know my Auntie Rosaline? And by the end of the story, he was in fits of laughter, and he told me to come and sit next to him, and he put his arm around me, and we took a picture to send to Auntie Bridgie, and if I ever go back to Ireland, to go and show that to Auntie Rosaline. So anyways, what a roundabout way to say that Auntie Bridgie, she passed away last year. She was in her 90s, but she was a devout Catholic. And she married into this very Hindu family. And Auntie Bridgie would take me to Mass with her sometimes. And I would sit in the pew while she would go up to get her wine and her little wafer. And she would come back and she would say, "It doesn't matter that you're a Hindu. God loves all his children. And I really loved the spectacle of Catholic Mass. You know, it was not dissimilar to the spectacle of being in a Hindu temple. And there was something about, like in Hinduism, you connect to certain deities. You just do. Sometimes it's because of the deity of your town where you grew up in India, but often it's just a feeling. And I have the deity that I connect to in Hinduism, but in Catholicism, they're not deities. I know there's going to be a lot of commentary in the comment section of this video. So, there's something about Mary. There's something about Mary. I think I had too much coffee today. I'm going to have some more. There's something about Mary that always spoke to me. And there were a few times when Auntie Bridgie called my mom and said, Harry and I, Harry Swaragantan was my mom's brother's name. She called him Harry. He's still alive. Harry and I are driving out to a little town because the Virgin Mary appeared to someone a few days ago, and she said she's coming back this Sunday at noon. So we're driving out, and we wanted to know if you and Rajiv would like to come with us. And a few times my mom and I got in the car and we drove out and we sat in a field and we waited for the Virgin Mary to appear. And although she never appeared, Auntie Bridgie always said she was there. She was there in my heart. I have such fond memories of all of that. And that is what connects me to this. This, whether or not you have any association with the Catholic Church, aside from religion, this is such a beautiful album. I play it usually first thing in the morning when I come into the barn. I open the windows and the door. If it's cold, it's even nicer to listen to this, where I leave the windows and the door shut. And I put this on, and it starts very quietly. And it's just so beautiful. I have so many CDs to get to, and I don't know how long I've been ranting, but I have to say a few more little things about this. I was in Europe, and I stumbled into a Catholic church that dates to the 10th century. And it was like the fall. It's when I lived in Munich. I took the train somewhere. I just stumbled in there kind of in the evening. And I walked in, and it was all stone. And I shut the door, and I sat in a pew. And I was all alone, and it was about to start raining. So I thought I better get inside in case it starts to pour before I make my way down the mountain again to the town. It's the church that belongs to an abbey. And I heard something behind me. I heard a door open, and then I heard footsteps. And I looked behind me at the choir loft, and I couldn't see anything. There was like a screen. And then there was some movement and rustling, and I heard like fabric rustling and papers rustling. And then all of a sudden, one single voice started calling out in Latin, and then many voices responded. And first I was in goosebumps, I covered in goosebumps, and then I was just in a pile of tears. For the next half an hour or 45 minutes, I sat there as nuns sang their vespers in the evening, their evening prayers. It was so incredible. It was such a wonderful gift that I was unexpectedly given. And I think of that when I'm listening to this CD. Highly recommended. Okay. Next, Jean Redpath, The Songs of Lady Nairn. So when I was in university, I was recruited to be a part of a little musical group that would sing at a Robbie Burns supper, the celebration of the 18th century Scottish poet, Robert Burns, Why this violinist asked me, I don't know, but she did, and I learned all these songs, and we sang for a couple years at a burn supper. So I'm very familiar with many Scottish songs, and the songs written by someone named Lady Nairn are my favorite. So this is not a very old CD, I've only had this a couple years, but I recently discovered this wonderful Scottish singer, Jean Redpath. And what I love about these songs is the melancholy aspect of both the melody and the lyrics. I was going to say I think my favorite, but I have too many. The top ones on the top ones on this CD, Jean Redpath, Will Ye No Come Back Again is the title of the CD. That's actually a song that I play on the harp. Will Ye No Come Back Again, asking Bonnie Prince Charlie if he'll come back again and whether they'll ever see him. There's a line in that song, Will ye no come back again? Will ye no come back again? Will ye no come back again? Better loved ye cannot be. Will ye no come back again? Better loved ye cannot be. That is one of the lines from all the folk songs that I know that always pulls at my heartstrings. It's not saying, it doesn't say, we love you so much. It's going the roundabout way, saying, I could not love you, we could not love you anymore. It's not possible. Better loved ye cannot be. Will ye no come back again? This is a song that I introduced to my group of musician friends in New York, and many a jolly night was spent around the piano where we would all sing the refrain together, and it became a kind of theme song for this group of friends, especially when a few of them left town and left New York. They would text me sometimes, will you know come back again? It's lovely. This is a beautiful CD, just Jean Redpath singing to very sparse instrumentation, but she sings with her soul. Speaking of singing with their soul, the Carter family, the history of country music in America has a cornerstone in the Carter family. The Carter family recorded their first record, I think in the 20s, 1927 in Bristol, Tennessee, is when the Carter family went into the Victor Recording Company to try out, like an audition. It's when records started to be made, and the Victor Record Company would hold these auditions for any musicians to come in and to record something and to see what happens. So the Carter family, that's how they became discovered. They went into this kind of open call. They took their beat-up instruments. Maybelle Carter had a guitar from Sears that she would play, and they played this homemade music, like folk songs, local songs that they just knew and would sing, and that's what they used for this audition of sorts. And months later, they were passing a general store, and there was a crowd around the general store, and they heard their music being played out of the general store. So their recording had become a record, and they started receiving royalties, and then they became famous. So Johnny Cash, many people might know Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash married June Carter, and June's mama was Mama Maybelle Carter, and she's the person with the she's standing with the guitar here. This was another CD that was in the pile of CDs here at Eve's place over 15 years ago, before I moved to the States. When I was visiting Eve, and I drove my mom's car down from Toronto, Eve said, hey, do you want some CDs to listen to on the way back home? And she gave me a pile, and I just started putting one in after the other. And then I came to this CD not knowing anything about these people. And I think I played this on loop for 5 hours for the remaining drive to Toronto. I could not stop listening to this. I was absolutely hooked. This music is, Maybelle's guitar goes out of tune regularly. They sing out of tune sometimes. I was just obsessed. I didn't know at the time what it was that drew me into the Carter family, but there was something so real about it and almost primitive. But they weren't classically trained musicians, and they made this music at home. And this is really what turned into country music. Maybelle Carter and the way she played the guitar inspired so many musicians after her. Dolly Parton plays so many Maybelle songs and will do like licks on the guitar like Maybelle. I love Maybelle Carter. I love the way she plays guitar, and she is who inspired me to pick up the guitar and learn the C chord, and then the G chord, and then the F chord. And when I knew those 3 chords, well, when I knew C and G, I started playing Carter family songs, and I could just play the chords and sing along because the songs are so simple. And I didn't need very much aside from those 3 chords to play many Carter family songs. That was quite a while ago that I first picked up a guitar. And my goal with playing the guitar is to be able to play like Maybelle Carter, a fantastic, innovative guitar player. Carter family. Next on the list, I cannot remember where this CD, where I first discovered this CD. This is The Golden Voice of Deanna Durbin. Deanna Durbin, that's probably not her real name, I'm sure it's not her real name, was a Hollywood movie star in the 30s and 40s, and she had a beautiful voice. So most of her movies were pretty, like the plot was not great. They're like B-list movies, and she's always singing in them. And in many of the movies, she's singing folk songs. She sings like Stephen Foster folk songs, like Home Sweet Home, but she also sings Irish and Scottish folk songs and as ballads. So on this CD are a few of my favorite ballads. The Last Rose of Summer. 'Tis the last rose of summer, left blooming alone. But there's also, there's so many great songs on this. Home Sweet Home. Oh, Annie Laurie. And it's there that Annie Laurie gave me her promise true. She belts it out, and usually every one of these numbers ends on a crazy high note. So Guy Wolf and I listen to this. I have a second copy of this in Connecticut, and Guy will humor me and allow me to play this while we're making pots. And when Deanna goes to the crazy high note at the end, Guy always does like a crazy falsetto and then actually hits it. And he kind of screams it. He shouts it like you could hear it from 2 miles away. And we just die laughing. And while he's belting out that last high note, I'm always saying, you get it, girl. You go for it, girl. I just feel like that's Deanna. She just went for it, and she got it. There are a couple of operatic pieces at the end, like Ave Maria, and a song from Madama Butterfly that she sings in Italian, and I laughed during those songs because the pronunciation of Latin and Italian are hideous. They're horrible pronunciation of both of those languages, which just amuses me. So, Deanna Durbin. Deanna, I just love you so much. Okay, Patsy Cline. I don't think Patsy Cline needs any explanation. Patsy Cline, so many people know so many of these songs. Maybe because of me. Crazy, I'm crazy for feeling so lonely. That song. Do you know this song? It starts with a violin trill. Sweet dreams of you, things I know can't come true. How about I fall to pieces, bum bum bum, each time I see you again. When I worked at the coffee shop in New York, we had CDs, like we could play CDs, and no, that's wrong. No, we had some electric thing. Then the electric thing broke and we had to use CDs, and I brought this in. My coworkers, so we would shift, like who got to pick the music, and when my turn would come, I only picked one thing. It's like when I was 5, 6 years old and my mom would ask me, what library book did you bring home? And every week for 3 years it was the same book, Mortimer Be Quiet. And she's like, again? I was like, yeah, Ma, again. I like what I like. Same with this CD. Rajiv, it's your turn. What are you going to play? And then they would all say together in unison, Patsy Cline. I played this for a year straight and drove everybody crazy, including the patrons. Although many patrons, like, it was very funny because it would always be like an older lady in her 70s or 80s that would come, when they would come up to the cash and I was working the cash and Patsy was playing, I just love this music. Or like a young girl, dewy-eyed, fresh-faced, oh my God, this music reminds me of my grandma. It's so sweet. Yeah, me and your grandma have that in common, and a lot of other things, like knitting. Patsy Cline, she's just the best. Okay, now we're gonna shift, and we're gonna shift like high gears to, there's just a few more remaining albums. We're going to shift to my parents' era of what kind of music did they listen to in Salon, as it was called at the time. Well, they had record players, but like record players were around, but they didn't, I think they were expensive. No, my mom talks about a gramophone, which is a similar thing. So they had some records for the gramophone, and my grandmother actually still had the gramophone, now I'm remembering, when she was old. She had her gramophone from Salon. But the way that they consumed music was through the radio. So there were there were only two types of music that they would have heard coming through the radio. Cinema music, the songs from the movies that were played during their day, like 1940s, 50s, 60s, and classical music, which all classical South Indian Carnatic music is religious. It's devotional. It's written for the divine, and usually if there's any lyrics, they're associated with some deity. So this first CD, Top Hits of M.L. Vasant Kumari. M.L. Vasant Kumari was a classical singer. She sang classical music, but she was also one of the top singers for film music. And this CD is all of her, well, some of her cinema music. Ayya Sami, Avude Sami, Ayya Raya Vaya Yo Kamaya, Ayya Sami, Avude Sami, Nare Kumblik Vangaleya. Her voice, I love her voice so much. It's so distinct. I can pick it out, like if I'm just listening to pieces that I haven't heard before. I can hear when it's ML Vasant's Kumari. She was really like the top singer of her day. This was early, like for my mom. It's ML Vasant Kumari was singing like in the 50s, not really in the 60s and 70s for cinema music. Someone else took over, P. Sushila. But this CD I play in here usually after the medieval chant. There's a sequence. After this, I usually follow that up with this. Sometimes I start with this if I want to start like with a upbeat. I'll put her on. In the line of beautiful South Indian lady singers, the most revered vocalist historically, I would say, I think I can say this with confidence, the sort of equivalent to Maria Callas in terms of classical singing in South India is someone named M.S. Subbulakshmi. She, her ability was incredible. So listening to South Indian music, I would say I don't recommend this to anyone out of the diaspora. Is that the right word? It's too foreign. It will sound very strange. And maybe you like it, but really it's so South Indian classical music, which is called Carnatic music, is so technical that unfortunately it's meant to be appreciated by people who understand what they're listening to, who are familiar with the structure of classical music, both the rhythm and the ragas. And I have to say, in my whole family, like I have 30 cousins, there isn't one cousin, no, not even one, that listens to this kind of music. I am the only person in my family of my generation, in my immediate family, who is interested in this kind of music. They're familiar with it. They would know it if they heard it, but they don't. They wouldn't want to listen to this. Listening to this music is like it's like hearing a mathematician and a painter at work at the same time. That's the only way I can describe it. And it starts like watching them paint with broad strokes of color, and then as the fervor picks up, it gets more and more and more and more intense. Sometimes there'll be a little slip of this being played when I'm around some of my white friends, and one in particular, you know who you are. She'll go, and we just laugh, and I'll jokingly say, hey, don't make fun of my culture, which will just make us laugh even more. But I know that that's kind of what it sounds like to someone who doesn't really know what they're listening to. It's very, very foreign. This fills my soul. This feeds my soul in a way that none of these other pieces of music, these other genres of music do, because I can't deny that I understand that I come from a really ancient culture, and there are things about my culture where the ancientness is still alive. And although this music is not ancient, there's something about it that's rooted in a truth associated with this culture. And it's very, very, very impressive what this lady can do. I understand some of the structure and the way that this music is put together, so I can really appreciate it. And although I've been listening to this CD for so long, look, it's all fallen apart. Every single time I hear certain pieces, I'm just left in awe. M.S. Subbulakshmi. I'm going to put links in the description of this video to examples of every single one of these albums on YouTube, because we don't have rights to these pieces of music, but I can put links in and you can check those out. And the last CD, the very best of Chopin. So Chopin playing on the piano. Chopin's a pianist, who there's a sort of a little connection here because my friend who I'm staying with, Eve, she's Polish, and she's actually distantly related to Chopin. A few years ago, I read a fantastic book, which was a biography of Chopin by Alan Walker. And that book changed my life. It was a big, crazy, thick book. A friend of mine who's a musician, Caroline, who plays the harp, she read the book and recommended it. And she's not one of those people that recommends books often. So I got it and I read it. And by the end of the book, I didn't want it to end. I felt like I had made friends with this man and I didn't want to see him go. The book starts off very beautifully. The author writes that from his desk in Toronto, he's going to propose something that he believes to be absolutely true. Within a 10-mile radius of where he's writing, he believes that someone is either playing Chopin on the piano, that Chopin is being played on a radio, or that Chopin is being listened to. And then he goes on to explain why. And he believed that Chopin wrote in a way that would truly be timeless, that his music would always have relevance across the world to anyone listening to it. And he described the music as returning home. That was the feeling from the essence of who Chopin was. Very interestingly to me was having this conversation with a friend who is a composer and a pianist who went to Juilliard, and we were talking about this, and my friend said, actually, I believe that Chopin is not returning home, but Chopin is longing to return home. That's the feeling of Chopin. And I can't help but get emotional when I talk about him because of this book. There's so much associated with his very short life that was plagued with tuberculosis. For most of his life, he was coughing and had to lie down. But even when he was lying down, even when he was like bedridden for months, he wrote one of the most beautiful Chopin pieces is the Raindrop Prelude. That was written when he was in bed in this horrible place in a room, and it was inspired by the rain on the roof of this dark, damp room that he was in. So this Chopin, I believe, is such a universally loved musician, and listening to him in here, especially when it's dark, we're cold. It's something else. It's something else from this other stuff. So, Jesus, Jesus, Holy Mary, Mother of God. I did not expect this to be so exhaustive, but that's the pile of CDs in here. What kind of music are you into?